It may take some time to adequately assess just how much Senator John McCain contributed to the ever-changing mess of today's bailout, turning suddenly into a Kraft bailing water. But the senator's suspension of his campaign injected presidential politics into this instead of making the process more bipartisan. And his stance may still scuttle an actual presidential debate in favor of a false one full of surrogates and lies. So in our fourth story in the countdown, what does all of it say about his management style, his ability to be a president? The senator suspended his campaign yesterday, Wednesday, even though just one day earlier on Tuesday, he admitted to having not even read the three-page bailout proposal from Treasury Secretary Paulson, which had become available the previous Friday, even though a little more than a week ago, McCain had said, quote, "The fundamentals of our economy are strong." What had changed, as Ben Smith of Politico.com first suggested, were McCain's poll numbers. If that sounds cynical, consider how this supposedly bold move mirrors McCain's choice of Governor Sarah Palin as his running mate. McCain evidently wanted to shake up his then listless campaign, and since he could not have Senator Joe Lieberman, his first choice, he went with somebody he had barely met. We are only now seeing the full implications of that management decision. Thus, the two major decisions of Senator McCain since becoming his party's nominee. Let's turn now to the Washington editor of The Nation magazine, Chris Hayes. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, Keith.
Is this latest story symptomatic of this term that I used before, the John McCain Build a Crisis Workshop?
Yeah, look, it's exactly that. And to be honest, I'm sort of sympathetic to the people running the McCain campaign. I mean, imagine you're Steve Schmidt or you're Rick Davis, right? You have, in the last 8 years, one of the biggest foreign policy blunders in the history of the Republic, the Iraq War. You have now a massive financial crisis that people are comparing to the eve of the Great Depression. So on foreign policy and domestic policy, you have seen mismanagement, incompetence on an epic scale. And you have a candidate who doesn't disagree with the incumbent on either of those things. So what do you run on? I mean, really, what do you run on? We're going to have more Iraq wars and more financial meltdowns? You can't do it. You cannot run on your actual platform. There's nothing they can do except for manufacture these crises and try to distract everyone and run out the clock until Election Day.
But doesn't there have to be some reality within these crises? I mean, no politics. So he gives a speech this morning to the Clinton Global Initiative, suspended the campaign, but the commercials still run and the surrogates are still out on every network. It's an emergency, but 9 days ago he thought everything was sound, and 2 days ago he hadn't even read the Paulson plan. Whatever this is it not mostly show?
No, it's absolutely. It's not even mostly show. It's entirely show. I mean, at this point, McCain, the gambler, the well-known gambler, is making an all-in bet on the stupidity of the American voter. That is the wager of the campaign at this moment. We will be able to fool people long enough that maybe, just maybe, come Election Day, we'll be within striking distance in the polls. And so they keep trying to pull rabbits out of hats and manufacture these crises and untether themselves from the actual conditions of the world, which are very dire and very important. They try to untether themselves from those as much as possible to have any hope of winning. But it is all show. There's no there.
Broadening this out, lastly, there is the senator's stance on Iraq, the last chance attitude there, the dynamic of having allowed events, his own actions to paint himself into a corner several different times there. What about judgment, and what about that word that was previously used about him in another context, temperament, to be commander-in-chief? What does all of this tell us about those things?
I mean, I'm actually kind of flabbergasted. It's really like watching someone who's just groping around in the dark. I myself, who did not particularly have a tremendously high opinion of the political judgment of John McCain before the last few weeks, have just been so taken aback by how ad hoc and impulsive the whole thing is. And obviously there was that reputation before, but all he does with every day is confirm it. And he confirms it at the expense of any kind of plausible account of how he's going to govern, which is the core of what being president of the United States would be.
Chris Hayes of The Nation magazine. Many thanks as always, Chris.